Cosmos Atom is sitting at $1.37, and that price is either the biggest mistake the market is making right now, or a warning sign most retail investors are completely misreading. Let's talk about why that number matters. Atom is up 11.1% in the last 7 days. That's not noise. In a market where most mid-cap altcoins are moving sideways or bleeding, an 11% weekly move on a coin that's been largely ignored tells you something is shifting. And when you dig into the on-chain data, exchange outflows, staking ratios, wallet accumulation patterns, what you find is that the retail crowd is still sleeping on this one, while a different type of buyer is quietly moving in. Now, before we get into the positioning and the price scenarios, you need to understand what Cosmos actually is, because most people who hold Atom couldn't explain it clearly. And that's exactly why they'll sell too early or miss the entry entirely. Think about the internet before standardized protocols. You had all these separate networks that couldn't talk to each other. Then TCP/IP came along and suddenly everything could communicate. That's what Cosmos is building for blockchains. Right now you have Bitcoin over here, Ethereum over there, Solana doing its thing, and they're all essentially isolated islands. Moving value between them requires centralized bridges or wrapped tokens, both of which introduce risk and friction. Cosmos built the Inter-Blockchain Communication Protocol, IBC, which is the TCP/IP of crypto. It lets sovereign blockchains speak to each other natively without needing a middleman. And here's why that matters beyond the tech. IBC is already live. It's not a white paper promise. As of 2026, there are over 100 chains connected through IBC, processing billions of dollars in cross-chain transactions. Chains like DYDX, one of the largest decentralized derivatives exchanges in the world, built directly on Cosmos infrastructure. Osmosis, Stride, Celestia, serious projects with serious volume, all running inside the Cosmos ecosystem. Atom sits at the center of all of it as the reserve asset and security layer. So when you buy Atom at $37, you're not buying a speculative bet on a concept. You're buying into an ecosystem that's already generating real economic activity. The question is whether the price reflects that reality. And right now, clearly, it doesn't. If this breakdown is giving you a clearer picture, subscribe to Crypto Seance. We break down moves like this before they go mainstream. Now let's talk about the money. The institutional angle here is less about a single ETF filing and more about infrastructure positioning. What we're seeing in 2026 is that large allocators, family offices, crypto-native hedge funds, and a handful of macro funds that got into digital assets after the Bitcoin ETF approval are starting to look beyond lay one bets. They already have Bitcoin and Ethereum exposure. The next question they're asking is, what's the connective tissue of this ecosystem worth? And the answer keeps pointing back to interoperability infrastructure, which means Cosmos is on that radar. Staking dynamics are also creating a mechanical supply squeeze that most people overlook. Atom has a relatively high staking yield, around 15 to 18% annualized right now depending on validator, which means a significant portion of circulating supply is locked up and not available on exchanges. When new demand hits a reduced float, price moves faster and harder than most models predict. That's not speculation, that's basic supply and demand math. Realistic price targets for Atom in the current cycle. A move back to the $4 to $6 range by end of 2026 is a conservative scenario that just requires the broader alt market to rotate and for Atom to reclaim its 2023 and early 2026 trading range. A more aggressive target in the $8 to $12 range by mid-2027 would require a full risk-on environment, continued IBC adoption growth, and some catalyst, whether that's a major institutional product, a high-profile chain migration onto Cosmos infrastructure, or renewed DeFi season driven by cross-chain activity. Neither of those targets requires Atom to do something unprecedented. Both would still leave Atom well below its all-time high. Now the honest bear case, because you need to hear this before you size a position. Cosmos has an execution problem. The governance structure is decentralized to the point of being slow, and there have been real community debates about the Atom value accrual model, basically arguments about whether Atom itself benefits enough from the ecosystem activity happening around it. That's not a made-up concern. Some of the most successful chains built on Cosmos have done so in ways that reduce their dependency on Atom as a security layer, using their own tokens instead. If that trend continues and Atom gets cut out of the value loop, the thesis weakens. There's also the competitive pressure from Polkadot, Layer 0, and Chainlink's CCIP, all of which are fighting for the interoperability narrative. Cosmos is ahead, but it's not unchallenged. And at rank 82 by market cap, Atom is not a top-tier liquid asset. In a risk-off environment or a prolonged bear phase, lower-ranked assets get hit harder and recover slower. If you're allocating here, you need to be honest with yourself about your time horizon and your risk tolerance. Here's where I land on this. Atom at $1.37 is one of the more interesting asymmetric setups in the top 100 right now. The infrastructure is real, the ecosystem activity is real, and the accumulation signals are real. The risk is real too. This is not a set it and forget it hold. You want to watch the staking ratio, watch IBC transaction volume, and watch whether major chains continue building on Cosmos or start migrating away. Those 3 data points will tell you more than any price chart. If you're already holding, the data supports staying patient. If you're researching an entry, the current price offers a relatively tight risk zone if you set your levels clearly. If you're avoiding it entirely, make sure you're doing that based on the fundamentals, not just because it's not Bitcoin. Subscribe to Crypto Sayans. We break down the top coins every week so you never miss a move like this. Hit the bell too, because the alerts are the only way you catch these breakdowns in real time.